doing, folks? Welcome to GM's Alcove. We're going to continue our refight of the Battle of Tifernum for SPQR, GMT's game of Wars of the Roman Republic. We're still in turn one. We're covering a lot of the basics of the rules. And right now we're in Roman General Rullianus's activation. We're going to see what he does to push forward with the Roman offensive against the Samnites. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into this battle and see what happens. So I want Rullianus to do a little bit more than just get people fighting. So I am going to actually spend an individual order to move him. There's no line commands going on here. This is individual orders. And the number of individual orders he can give is equal to his initiative rating, which is 5. So as his first order, he's going to give it to himself to move, and he wants to get a little bit closer to this Velite, and I'll show you why in a second. 1, 2, let's go here, 3. So he shifts this way, and he can move through friendly units and all that stuff. I want to put this Velite within 6, which is his command range. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to spend a second individual order to move this Velite to kind of get on the flank of one of these units here, this unit of Samnites. And the way we're going to do that, I'm going to give him a move order, and he's going to spend 1 movement point to change his facing. Now with Romans, 1 movement point allows them to change facing to any facing they want within a hex. Now, it's worth mentioning that the Romans are a little bit more maneuverable when it comes to changing facing within a hex, as opposed to the Samnites or many other nations. Other nations normally pay 1 movement point per vertex changed. So yeah, Romans are a little bit more maneuverable. So I'm going to shift 1 to there. That costs me 1. And then 2, 3, 4, change again, 5. And our last movement point, we have 6, is going to be right here to bring this unit within my front zone so I can engage him. We got this leader here. Now, whenever an enemy unit moves adjacent to his hex, this leader, because the enemy unit moved here, can move up to 1 to 3 hexes away. Kind of like a withdrawal. It's just 1 to 3 hexes as far as I want. So I'm going to move 2 hexes, 3 hexes, all the way back to the front line, just to get away from these Velites, because we don't want to get wiped out and captured. Now, I don't point this out in the actual video, but at this point, at the conclusion of that unit of Velite's movement, it would incur 1 cohesion hit, and that's for moving a second time. After the completion of the Velite's move, he would be marked if the Velite player wants to attack with a shock must check TQ marker. This is just like with heavier infantry, like heavy infantry and legionnaires, where it's mandatory to do so. In the case of the light infantry, it's an option. It's the player's choice if he wants to continue with a melee. In this case, I am going to mark him with a shock must check TQ because we want to get this guy involved in the combat and get that superiority for attacking the enemy light infantry's rear. Something else that's interesting here is that as soon as the Velite unit moved adjacent, normally the light infantry would be able to reaction facing change. However, because he's engaged with the Velite units to his front, he's not able to do so. So, with that, I have, let's see, I have 3 more order points or orders that I can give. I could move finished leaders if I want, so they can't actually move. Once per activation. Again, up to 9 movement points. But I'm not going to do that. Let's keep things simple and just go to the shock segment of the orders phase. So with that, first thing we want to do is we want to remove these engaged markers. Let's take them off. And they will be replaced with a shock no check TQ output. And this is the first thing you do at the start of the shock segment. You mark units with shock, no check TQ. I should mention here that units marked with engaged markers must be given a shock, no TQ marker if they are within the leaders, the activated leaders, command range. It's not a choice as it is for other units that might be within range of the activated leader. Now, there is one exception to this, and that involves units of skirmishers, light infantry, or cavalry who have a higher movement allowance than the units they are engaged with. They're allowed to retreat 1 hex instead of taking a shock no TQ check marker. This way, they're able to maneuver away from the combat and not continue engaged with the enemy. Of course, in this case, we're going to keep the fighting going. They're going to accept the shock no TQ check and engage in shock combat. Yeah, there's no zones of control and all that stuff to worry about. So yeah, he's good. And let's also put this unit. Let's do some fighting here and get some resolution to all this. And the unit next to him as well. Shock no TQ. They're going to fight. And let's see, there's one unit up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I could. And let's see what his situation is. He's got 1 hit. We'll do that. We're going to give him a shock no TQ. So we got lots of combats to resolve here. Unfortunately, they're all lighter troops. Not the best idea. You want to use these guys not for melee, but for engaging the enemy with their javelins. So there, they're all marked. There is one thing to check before you check for leader casualties, and that is any units marked with shock must check TQ. They would make that TQ check now before we go any further. So then we go to the leader casualties, and then after that we go to the actual resolution of the combats, working left to right, and we check the Clash of Spears and Swords chart, and then we go to superiority. We figure size ratio, any column shifts, and then we roll our die and look down the column that's appropriate. So let's look at this first combat, working left to right, and let's resolve that once again where we originally started. The 2 velites fighting, well, 3 now. There's 1 on the rear. Let's resolve this whole combat and show you how that's done and see if we can finish off these pesky light infantry Samnites. One thing I have to do here, because there is multiple units involved on the attacking side, is designate which one of them is actually going to be used for determining superiority and all that. And it has to remain the same unit all the way through. And I'm going to choose this back unit in the rear, and the reason for that is because he has superiority for attacking from the rear. So we're going to use him as the designated unit. And just for reminder's sake, let's put a little arrow there to indicate that. All right, let's get to this 3-step process. The first thing we do is we go to the Clash of Spears and Swords chart. Again, main unit is attacking from the rear, so this is the section we want to look at, rear attacks on the defender. Now we look up the defender's type. He is light infantry right here. We cross-reference that with the type of attacker. In this case, the attacking unit is here, light infantry. So it's column 9 that we're going to be referring to in the shock combat results table. Put that right here. I like to jot this stuff down. Next, we go to superiority. Now, the first thing you do is check if you have position superiority, if you remember. If you don't, then you go to this chart and figure out superiority based on weapons and armor system, basically the troop types. Now, our attacking unit is the one we're looking at here, the one attacking from the rear. That gives this attacker superiority. So, the attacker, velites, do have superiority in this situation over the defender. And I like to put a little attacker superior symbol there. And that's it. There's really nothing else that applies here in our case. Just some few notes as to when there's exceptions and so on and so forth. Okay. Now we go to this section right here. And what we need to keep in mind is this here. The results of this combat will be adjusted because the attacker has superiority. This first bullet point. If attacker superior, double the defender's result. So let's say we got this result here. 2, 2. The attacker takes 2, and the defender takes 2 cohesion hits. The defender would double this 2 to 4. He would take twice as much cohesion hits as this indicates. That's the advantage of having attacker superiority. If the defender's superior, triple the attacker's result. So you can see how that plays a role here. And there's some other stuff in here, little notes. Depletion, nobody is depleted in this combat. Terrain adjustments, it's all clear terrain, so there is no adjustments for terrain. Phalanx units doesn't count, and there's no leaders involved. They will not be adding their charisma ratings, listed on the counter, to this combat. So that's ignored. So the only thing to look at now is the size difference, the size ratio difference. And I'll read this here. Shift a number of columns left or right based on the ratio of the sizes. Does not apply to elephants versus non-elephants or chariots versus non-chariot combats. Okay, let's look at the sizes here. Now, if we look at our involved units, the numbers we're after here are that center number with a red background. In this case, there's a 3. This unit here is a 4. And this Velite is also a 3. So they have 6, 79, 10, a size ratio of 10, or a value of 10. And I should jot that down. Going against the Samnites, who only have a size of 4. They have a yellow background behind that number. So it's basically, attackers on the left, 10 to 4. All right, and with that done, we could see that we're at least a 2-to-1 advantage for the Romans, with a possible 3-to-1 because of the remainder left over. Now, this will round off in favor of the attacker if any of the attacking units moved prior to the combat, to affect the combat. And that was the case. This one Velite did actually move to that location there, so he does count. He does allow the attacker to make this 3-to-1 odds. It'll be rounded in his favor. So we are at 3-to-1. Now the effect of this is column shifts in favor of the attacker in this case, 3-to-1. And in this case, it's going to be 2 shifts to the right. So this is going to be actually column 11 that we're going to be looking at. And that, according to our chart, are the only modifiers, column shifts, or die roll modifiers that apply. So we're going to roll a d10 under the 11 column, and any results, the attacker is superior, which means that the defender will take twice as much cohesion hits. So let's roll that and see what happens. Now at this point, the order that we resolve each separate combat that takes place during this activation, the normal way to do it is to go through each step for all separate combats one at a time. And those steps are, first is the charge. That's where we make all those TQ checks for units that moved and must check TQ. We do that across the battlefield for any units that need that check. This is followed by checking for leader casualties, where there's leaders involved with a combat, we check to see if they're going to be casualties. And the next step is to consult the Clash of Spears and Swords chart. And that's where we find out which column we're going to be using in the final CRT. Once that's determined, the next step is to resolve the hand-to-hand combat. And we work with each separate combat one at a time, starting off by checking superiority, the size ratio, column adjustments for terrain, phalanx units, etc. We roll the dice and we apply the hits. The next step is going to be the collapse. This is where we check for routes and all that sort of stuff. That's the final step. Once that's done, we've basically fought every combat on the battlefield. That's the normal sequence for resolving the combats on the battlefield. Let's go ahead and roll this under the 11 column with attackers superior because of that Velite in the back. High rolls are better. And we get a 6, no modifiers to the die roll. Let's check it out on the chart. And here we are. We're going to be using column 11. And we're going to check out, what was the die roll here? We got 6 under column 11. So where's our result? Right there. 2 and 4. Attacker's superior, so the 4 becomes 8. The defender takes twice as much casualties. So let's jot that down and apply the effect. All right, here we go. Now let's look at the attackers here. They took 2. They have to be equally spread around all the attackers. So we're going to put 1 on this unit that was used to attack. There are priorities when you distribute cohesion hits. In this case, there's 3 units and only 2. And one of these 2 units, both of which we're fighting, will receive. They both have 2 currently. So we're going to make one of them a 3. Like this. I'm going to take this unit right here. So he took 3. I'll remove the 2. This unit has taken 3 cohesion hits. So he's taken 3, he's taken 2, and he's taken 1. Now let's keep in mind that Velite unit next to the arrow in the back there behind the light infantry, that unit actually has a total of 2 cohesion hits. Remember, he moved a second time previously and incurred a cohesion hit for that. And of course, the combat gave him his second cohesion hit. Now, as far as the opposition, they received 8 cohesion hits. Now, that definitely exceeds his TQ of 5, and he's already got 4, so this unit was smashed. He's definitely going to be routed. We're going to turn him to face the opposite direction, and we're going to mark him with a routed marker to indicate that. So he's definitely been beaten, and that's what it would look like. And these little hits can be removed. They're not going to be applied. He's a TQ of 1. You just remove any current cohesion hits he has. It has no effect on it. And that's how we distribute the hits. Next step, well, technically you're supposed to go to the next combat and do the same thing. But for the sake of this video demonstration, we're going to jump ahead and resolve this off camera. And then we're going to go what's next, which is the collapse step. All right, I just resolved the combats for the remaining units down here. Everybody took losses. The only thing that happened was this unit right here, this Samnite unit, currently has 5 cohesion hits on it. So he might rout, and we'll get into that in a second. But the other combats here and here, they took a few cohesion hits. I think they were like 2 each, but none of them will be put in rout. He's got 3. This unit is at 3 currently, and these Roman units, these Velites, are at 2 apiece. Same for him. Oh, he's at 3. So none of these have equaled or exceeded their TQ, and none of them are within 1 of their TQ. The only situation where that happens is here, this unit. It's important to know that because what we're going to do now is we're going to roll a dice for any unit whose current cohesion hits equals 1 less than its TQ. They have to roll a die, and it's basically a TQ test, and he's 1 under. His is 6, he has 5 cohesion hits. Doesn't apply anywhere else. Let's roll a die, a TQ test basically. He needs a 6 or less, and I'll show you what's going to happen here. Right, and we'll use the red die, because they're Samnites. So 6 or less, this is important. 8. He fails. Now, because he failed his TQ test in this instance, what is going to happen is he's going to be marked as routed. Because he failed that little test, he is going to rout, and that's unfortunate. Now, normally you would carry out routs as they occur for each separate and individual combat, one at a time. But in our case, we're going to do them all at once. We're going to leave everything on the board and route everything all at once, so you can get some context as to how routes are carried out. And with that, we'll start on the left, the combat we just fought for you guys on camera. First of all, every hex that he could move into is considered blocked because it's in an enemy zone of control. In this case, it's his zone of control. In this case here, it's his zone of control as well as his. And same thing here. There is nowhere to go. He's completely blocked, which means he is eliminated. So we'll just remove him, and we're going to put him in the dead pile. And he's going to count towards the route points of the Samnites. We also do likewise for this unit down here. It's basically 2 hexes move straight back towards your retreat edge. Just a short little hustle. 1, let me grab him. 1, 2, and that's his route movement. That's it. And the next step of the collapse is to actually move the units, or advance, I should say, into the vacated hex. The only restriction is the advancing unit cannot be in a zone of control of an enemy unit currently. The unit advances, of course, is the unit that was used to determine superiority and so on and so forth. That would here, so he will advance forward. Now you can change your facing up to 1 hex spine. Right there. Let's change his facing to there. Okay, so he's done. Next combat, these guys will be marked engaged. There was nobody that routed. But this one, we had that route here, so he's going to advance into the vacated hex. He's not going to change his facing. We'll just keep it there. Or will we? No, we will. We'll change his facing 1, and he's good. So that's it. These little markers can be removed. These units are all marked with engaged counters to show that they're in a continuing fight. All of them. Because there was nobody that routed. And at that point, the shock segment of the orders phase is complete. And with that, that would normally finish things off for Rulianus, but he's going to attempt one more momentum check. He can do that. You can use up to 2 momentum after your initial orders phase. So basically you can do as many as 3 orders phases with the same commander. This would be Rulianus's 3rd if he is successful. He's going to try it again. And once again, he's going to need a 5 or less to do so. And he gets a 2. So that means, you guessed it, he gets another momentum, his last one. The Samnites could attempt to trump here. They're not going to. Keep things simple. And I'll look at this and see if I want to do any orders somewhere. But I definitely want to resolve some more combats, because we do have these engaged guys, and we do have an advantage. So I think I might swarm some of those velites around those other light infantry that are currently engaged, like we did up here, and kind of finish them off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip ahead and show you the results. All right, this is the end of the combat. It's actually the end of Rulianus's orders phase completely. And yeah, so he'll be flipped to finish after this. But here's the look of the battlefield after the fighting. Remember, there was some fighting here. Both of these units are now engaged. They each took 2 cohesion apiece, so they're still good. But over here it was telling. Both of these Samnite units up here were destroyed. All the retreat or hexes were all blocked. They could not escape, and they were destroyed. One thing I should point out, that Rulianus had 5 orders he could give. He used 3, 1 to move, and then he moved this unit, and he moved that unit as well, this unit, into those flanking positions. So that was 3, but he had 2 more, and he used them to issue recovery orders to these 2 Velite units that were not in adjacent to enemy or close to enemy missile units or whatever. But these guys recovered 2 cohesion hits apiece, so I did do that. And then we went on to the combat, fought it out, and this was the result. Both of those Samnite light infantry units were destroyed. They will be removed from the battle. That does add a total of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 points to the Samnite route max. They've accumulated 16 route points. And there we are. We're all set. This ends this. We go to C, which is the momentum phase, which we're done with, because he can't use momentum again. He's going to be flipped. And it now goes to the next in initiative order, which is the Samnites. You could just see them at the top of the screen. It's going to start with him, because he has initiative of 5. That second number from the left. And then that'll be followed by Ignatius, who has initiative of 6. So there's no Romans that can activate at this point. So they're good to go. There we go, folks. Rulianus completes his turn 1, and that finishes off the Romans. Play now goes over to the Samnites, starting with Herennius, who's the next in initiative order to take action. And we'll see what the Samnites do. Romans are quite successful on the front lines there with their velites, having wiped out the entire right wing of light infantry of the Samnites. Skillful use on the part of Rulianus of his light infantry. Now we're going to see what the Samnites do next. How are they going to respond? Stay tuned, folks. The next episode is coming. We're going to dig into some more close combat action. And leave me some comments, feedback, questions about SPQRs, always welcome. Let me know what you think about SPQR. If you want to see more, let me know. Like, share, subscribe, all that goodness. Hang in there, folks. It's only going to get better. We'll see you next time.